Hi, my name is Jeff H. Sipe, and I have over 10 years of recruiting experience, including 5 years at Google. In this video, we're going to talk about open-ended frameworks for behavioral questions. So let's take a simplistic step back. To answer any open-ended question, it's a great idea to create frameworks. And frameworks are really identified and created by going through consistent themes, consistent items that have happened in your career, thinking role specific for the position you're interviewing for, and then pulling out these concepts of what's happened in your career and creating this more generic mnemonic. This will help you stay incredibly organized and structured in an interview, specifically when trying to handle open ended questions. And so you've put in all this hard work to think about what you've done in the past and create this generic framework, but something's been forgotten. And that's recognizing how we take this framework and put it back into our behavioral answers. I really want you to stick with me on this. I'm going to share my screen, but by creating this really good duality, you are going to have tremendous success on both sides of the coin. But I really want to focus today on how we take those frameworks and we focus on putting all those concepts back into our behavioral answers. If you like my content, please like. If you have any comments, please comment below. And if you like my overall content, please subscribe. Essentially, you've worked really hard, right? You've created these frameworks, you've identified these consistent themes, but are you considering all these themes as you talk through your examples? And probably not. And so why spend all the time to identify the themes to not consider them just as important in your examples? And so this is not meant to confuse you. When answering behavioral questions, you are definitely going to use the Starolf method, and I'll pin that video up above. But consider on whether or not you've touched on these high-level critical concepts as you type out your behavioral answers. And this duality will absolutely strengthen your examples because you'll be thinking about all the concepts that are important for the role. So let's stick with the framework that we've created for program managers. I'll pin that video up above. Specifically, we've created this mnemonic G, HBT, RRSS. Goals and objectives, history, budget, timeline, resources, risk, scope and scale, stakeholders, and shared vision. And so when writing out your behavioral answers that are a little bit more focused on these high-level strategic operational challenges, successes, you're going to want to think about how these specific items apply to your example and making sure to reference all of these concepts in your answer. Is this confusing? Yeah, I think it is a little confusing. So what I'd love to do now is share my screen and give you a little bit more of a visual of what I'm talking about. So let's start with our behavioral interview examples doc. You can download this off my website at practiceinterviews.com, but essentially this just walks you through some videos that might help and then gives you the setup and gives some additional information on how you would write out your behavioral examples. We'll skip over that for now. And so essentially all I'm doing is I'm going to start by making a copy and then I want to scrap it. So what I mean by scrapping it is I'm going to clear out all that information and just have my situation, my task, my actions, my results, my learnings, and my follow-up questions. And then additionally what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've put our G, HBT, RRSS framework up top. So again, in this case, we're going to use this more strategic operational framework as we're thinking about our behavioral examples. For other examples, you might use a collaborative framework, or you might use like a GCP specific framework, whatever that framework's going to be. But now you've set it up, and now let's go and let's look at what an example sample answer might look like. So I've keeping this super high level. I haven't gone into all the weeds, all the details, but I wanted to show you just what the initial setup might look like. Okay, so we have our framework up here. Our situation, I always like to kind of title my example. So this is my provisioning servers example. And now let's start to talk through it. So When I was working as a program manager focused in data center capacity planning at Google, we missed a critical timeline to provision new servers for our data center in Austell, Georgia. The missed timeline created risks from a resourcing and scope creep perspective. Task: I was tasked with keeping it on budget and not overutilizing our current resources. So the first action I needed to take was I researched what happened, I referenced historical documentation to quickly identify solutions, and then I hosted an urgent meeting over Google Meets with critical stakeholders, specifically reviewing our goals and objectives, revisiting our shared vision, and discussing how to mitigate current and future risks, and lastly, updating documentation. Now, again, you would continue through the rest of your example, but what you can see here is that just in that beginning portion, I have highlighted words that are going to come up from this framework. And even just through that first action, I was able to incorporate all 9. And that wasn't a push. They were all really necessary in this example. And then at the end, you could even go back and you could say, okay, I know that I mentioned goals and objectives once, I mentioned history 4 times, and just get a sense as you go through, okay, this is how many times I referenced each of these items. And as you reflect back, were you pushing it? Were you really trying to incorporate these words to force them in? Or were they critical concepts that were necessary for your interviewer to really understand how you are really consistent in how you look at being a program manager and what you do in a program manager role? As I mentioned in the screen share, to save time, I didn't go through the complete example, but I wanted to give you the high level understanding of how to bring the framework back into your behavioral examples. I've never been a program manager before, especially not focused in capacity planning for data centers, but it is a role that I recruited for. So I just wanted to go high level and give you some idea of how you might utilize those concepts, at least in the beginning of your answer, but you're going to want to utilize those concepts throughout. This has come up a lot with my clients, and this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to focus on this video, even though it's super tricky, a little confusing. Just think duality. If we can be talking about these concepts as we pull them out of our behavioral answers and talking in frameworks and put them back into all of our behavioral answers, we are going to have tremendous success. I really hope this helps. Good luck.